quiet, girl.
What's going on, everyone? Jeremy here from The Quartering, and it's another week and another massive drop in the Star Wars box office. Now, look, the film's been out for what, going on 3 weeks now? It's difficult to say it's failing. The movie's, I mean, if the movie doesn't make $1 billion, I will be shocked. But the more and more momentum it appears to be losing, the more questions that are getting raised. The fact that the international market seems to be rejecting it. It also seems that most of the marketing has tailed off. There was a time where when I would check my own videos to see if it actually got ads, I'd be seeing Star Wars ads nonstop, but I haven't seen them anywhere. And considering what they did within Fortnite, I can probably say it's safe to say from a marketing perspective that huge Fortnite marketing push was a failure for them. Surfshark, which is an excellent VPN where I have a exclusive 3 months plus 1 extra month for free and save up to 83% using my promo code Quartering. If you aren't using a VPN now, you absolutely should consider one. And if there's one that you would like a recommendation for, Surfshark has backed this channel for now the 2nd month in a row. Their software will allow you to unlock Netflix, protect your online identity, find the best prices on things online, bypass censorship everywhere. The software also works mobilely on your laptop and mobile phones. So protect yourself today. Don't wait a minute longer. Use my link in the description below where you can support the channel and protect yourself with Surfshark. Now, according to Forbes, box office, Star Wars: Rise of Skywalker suffers massive 81% plunge. This is written yesterday. 2 weekends ago, Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker joined a new club. Mind you, the club of film does not want to join. And what was this past weekend? The new club, by the way, was the $100 million Losers Club, which we talked about. This past weekend, things got worse. After pulling $177 million on opening weekend of the domestic box office, the latest Disney flick has only made $72 million the following weekend, which officially made The Rise of Skywalker the part of the $100 million Losers Club. The newest Star Wars sequel became the 11th movie ever to pull that off. And I think that the reason, I mean, it's easy to say like, well, let me cry on this pile of money. And I think that that might be a realistic response or a fair response. But the idea is, you have major review problems if you have your opening weekend make $177 million and then you can't even break $100 million in the second week. That's saying a lot, especially for a Star Wars film franchise where many of those early fans are well known to see the movie 2, 3, 4, 5, or even 6 times. The article continues. Sometimes becoming a new club member can be an honor. For instance, after pulling in a monstrous $358 million on opening weekend earlier this year, Avengers Endgame would drop its second weekend gross by more than $200 million. In this case, opening weekend gross was so mind-blowingly out of reach that the second weekend gross would inevitably be dwarfed by comparison. Other times, the $100 million loss isn't justified. For instance, Star Wars: The Last Jedi's weekend-over-weekend box office revenue dropped by $150 million or $148 million between weekend 1 and weekend 2. That's an alarming 67.5% drop, nowhere near Endgame's 58% drop. Ideally, the lower opening weekend revenue is, the lower the second weekend percentage drop should be. That wasn't the case for The Rise of Skywalker. While opening weekend revenue stood at an impressive $177 million, second weekend dropped to $72 million, that's a $105 million loss, was good enough to rank 7th all time. But total box office revenue that dropped between weekend 1 and weekend 2 isn't what matters here. It's the percentage of the drop that tells us how bad things really are. Here's the same list according to the percentage of each film the second weekend drop. So we looked at The Avengers losing $210 million, The Last Jedi losing $148 million, Infinity War losing $142 million, The Lion King losing $115 million. These are all movies or videos of movies that came out and joined the $100 million Loser Club. However, the number one, the biggest week-over-week loss in history belongs to Star Wars: The Last Jedi at a 67.5% drop, followed by The Lion King at 60, followed by Captain America: Civil War at 60, Age of Ultron at 60, and then, The Last Jedi was number 1, Rise of Skywalker, number 5 overall. I misspoke. So 2 Star Wars films had the biggest drops percentage-wise. As you can see, The Rise of Skywalker's second week dip is near The Lion King, which made $191 million opening weekend, and much worse than The Avengers, which pulled in a whopping $200 million. And now we've officially had The Rise of Skywalker from weekend 3, $33.7 million. While that's a 53.4 drop from weekend 2, that also happens to be an outstanding 81% drop from weekend 1. Turns out only 2 movies from that club have suffered larger third weekend drops, and of course that was Avengers Endgame, Captain America Civil War. The same rule stands here. The larger a film's opening weekend gross, the larger drop should be on the third weekend at box office. So with an 82.2% drop for Endgame makes sense, which is a drop from $357 million. This fall is much more telling for The Rise of Skywalker, especially when we consider the other latest Star Wars sequels. The Force Awakens avoided the $100 million loser club when revenue dropped from $248 to $149 the second week. That's barely. And the third week revenue fell to $90 million, which represented a measly 63.6 drop from opening weekend. While Last Jedi's second weekend drop of 67% is the worst ever for a club member, the third weekend drop was much lower in Rise of Skywalker, 76.1%. For further proof, look no further than total grosses for each film after 3 weekends. While The Force Awakens had raked in $742 million by the third weekend, The Last Jedi scored $517 million, and The Rise of Skywalker currently sits at a quiet $450 million. That's crazy to me. That's a huge drop. And it's so funny. It's so funny. Like, I get the irony. We're talking about films that are still making $1 billion. But when you look at the production budget, and the rule of thumb has always been, let me look up the budget. I'm sure these are always underestimated too. They say it has grossed over $927 million worldwide against a production budget of $275 million. So if we double that, I think that's a rule of thumb with films. You double it, so you have what? $550 million in budget and marketing. They're still doubling their money. I mean, Disney is still making plenty of cash, but it's shocking, and Star Wars fans should be alarmed. Star Wars fans inside of Disney should be alarmed at the trend here. So The Rise of Skywalker has needed $1 billion on the global spectrum. The Disney film's domestic run has landed with a bit of a thud after just 2.5 weeks in theaters. And I can't imagine, basically with everybody going back to school now and seeing any random spikes in that. And we look at Cinema Blend. Star Wars Rise of Skywalker has seen significantly high drops attendance in opening weekend. Star Wars Rise of Skywalker has been in movie theaters for more than 3 weeks now, and it's been mostly good news. The film is already $918 million globally and should pass the $1 billion mark in the coming weeks. However, percentage-wise, the numbers are looking a bit less beautiful. The Star Wars Rise of Skywalker dropped a whopping 81% in its third weekend. To note, this movie will make money for its parent studio. It's also worth noting Star Wars movies have traditionally seen kind of large drops at the box office from week to week, as excited fans love to go opening weekend. For example, in comparison, Ryan Roundhead Johnson's Star Wars The Last Jedi dropped 67.5% between weekend 1 and weekend 2. Again, most of the time movies do drop in the charts from week 1 and week 2. I would guess that almost always that's true. But we look at Wonder Woman, which came out in 2018. That movie was touted as having a fairly low percentage drop from week to week 2. From week 1 to week 2. It only dropped 44.6% between weekend 1 and weekend 2, and that was considered a really good drop. So essentially, the point is, if a film drops 50% from week 1 to week 2, that's probably normal. I mean, most of your viewing attendance is going to be front loaded, and few films have the legs of something like, James Cameron's Avatar or Titanic, where it was in the theaters for like a year. What does this mean? Going forward for Star Wars, I think we're going to see news dry up a little bit now for the rest of the year. I'm sure this video will get fewer views than most of the Star Wars videos I've done over the past few weeks, and I'm not even going to release it at prime time probably, because I know that Star Wars is in a weird spot right now. I think that it can be saved, and I do think admitting that Disney is incapable of handling a trilogy, which they've done, is probably a smart move. I still stand by that Rogue One is the best Disney Star Wars movie. I stand by that strongly. And I'm saying, of course, the bar is exceedingly low. It's Rogue One or The Force Awakens. I'm pretty sure. Certainly, The Rise of Skywalker and The Last Jedi are in the bottom. The Last Jedi is probably my least favorite. But if you add all of the problems with The Rise of Skywalker and all the huge massive letdown and all the leaks and everything, it almost surpasses a dislike of The Last Jedi, which is saying something truly amazing. I'm not sure what they're going to do. I think if they can focus on stories and make us love the characters again, you've got to do that. You've got to make the fans re-fall in love with characters. I think they walked the tightrope too closely with bringing back beloved characters to try and bring people's and put butts in seats. You know, you bring back Luke Skywalker, bring back Leia, bring back Lando. So then you can put him in the trailer and all the fans from the 70s will be like, oh, I remember that character. I'm going to go see him. Well, while you were waving that in front of us, you didn't do anything really to make many of us care about the characters that much. Yeah, you had your Reylos, and I think Ben Solo did kind of grow on me over the years. It took 3 films to do it. Daisy Ridley's character really never connected with me, but, you know, critics will say it's because she's a woman, which is ridiculous. The rest of the characters in the film weren't interesting. BB-8 was probably the most memorable. It was certainly my wife's favorite character in all the films, and that's pretty sad. A robot that really does nothing but bleeps and bloops as being the most memorable character in a billion-dollar movie franchise is pretty pathetic. We're going to have to see what Disney does going forward. We'll see things ramp up. I'm glad to see this saga come to an end. I'm glad to be done with Daisy Ridley. You know, I think that Adam Driver was fine as Ben Solo, and I think everyone really got shafted in these movies with poor writing. You know, next time maybe have the same director for all 3 films. Just start there. Hope you enjoyed this video. We'll talk to you again real soon.